We have our special guest, Professor Len Sherman, who is a professor at the Columbia Business School and is here to talk about his controversial Forbes article titled "Uber's CEO Hides Driver Pay Cuts to Boost Profits," compiling data from driver pay disguised with upfront fares and boosting what Uber passengers are paying, and boosting what Uber passengers are paying. The article was removed, added Uber's comments, and reposted a few days later. Now Uber puts out an article trying to rebut Professor Len Sherman's claims in their article titled "Understanding Uber's Share of Driver Earnings," which we will break down and discuss on next week's Show Me the Money Club. So don't miss that one. But today, let's bring on Professor Len Sherman. And again, if you haven't read the article, link will be in the description below. Professor Len Sherman, how you doing?
Doing all right. How are you doing, Chris?
Good. Thank you for coming on.
Hey, Sergio.
Hey,
it's been a while since I've been on the show, so thanks for inviting me back.
Yeah, you've been, well, that was like in the initial days of Show Me the Money, and then,
Has anything happened in between, or have I missed anything?
A few things happened in between. No, we grew the community to a really amazing level, really. And then, with their support, we're here. Look, I'm not going to deny it, obviously, but let's... obviously, I have his permission to call him Len. So I've always called him Professor Sherman, but then he goes like, "Len, please stop with the professor." I get called professor all day long. So I'm like, okay. So Len, welcome, first of all. And let's, talk a little bit about the article, okay? I've been around this joint for a while. I don't know how many articles I've written or been part of, but I've never seen an article go so viral ever, okay? Now, as like Chris said, it came out on Monday, maybe for less than 24-hour period, and then it was gone. So I got more emails about where did it go than if my dog got lost. I'm like, I don't know what happened. Why are you guys asking me? You can ask the professor. Well, right. We don't know. What happened? Give us a little background for a few minutes about, what happened, and then we'll get into the article.
Yeah, it's just amazing to see how kind of all in the absence of information, these conspiracy theories of, oh my God, Forbes spiked the article and Uber, demanded it was and none of that was really the case. I made just a bad rookie mistake. I was headed off on vacation. I was desperate trying to get this article out. And as is normal protocol, when you write an article that, in journalism, they would say, if the article might be construed as critical of the company you're writing about, it would be expected that you would preview it with them and sort of summarize. You don't send them the article, you preview the key findings and then ask if they would care to respond. And of course, if they do, you include that. And if they don't, you say, well, they chose not to. And I sent that article, and to their credit, to the PR executive to whom I sent it, promised she would get back to me, and did. And as I was rushing off to fly off to a Caribbean island on vacation, I just plumb missed it. So to make a long story short, the article went up saying they chose not to respond. That was not true. They did. And they were justifiably upset. I felt horrible about it. Got back to the Uber executive, apologized profusely. It was just my mistake. And my editor and I agreed that we owed it to ourselves and, more importantly, to Uber to make it clear that they had responded, and for me in turn to respond to their disagreements with the article. So it was taken down. Everyone was satisfied that that was the right thing to do. I'm the culprit. I made the mistake. And then it went up, and if you have had a chance to see it, you'll see right up top, I sort of claim that this is the situation. I summarize up top that they didn't like some of the conclusions, and there we are. So there was no kind of hidden agendas on any sides. I just made a rookie mistake.
Yeah, well, it's the internet, right? On the internet, everything flies around. Conspiracy theories happen, this happens, that happens. But the key is, article did go back up, right? Obviously, you had full editorial support of Forbes, and article went up.
I try to respond to there was some very legitimate suggestions that were made by Uber, but in particular asking for more detail. And I took the time. It took me a couple of days. I took the time to try to be as clear as I could about, what my sources and methods and what, simple formulas. I just laid it all out there. You could agree or disagree, but hopefully it's now a lot clearer, how I came to the findings that I did, and we can talk about them as we go through.
Yeah, we will definitely talk about them. And this hit a nerve with the driver community for sure, right?
It did.
I mean, as far as I can tell, to our audience or to the community that we talk to on a weekly basis, this article was not a revelation. Drivers have been saying this, seeing this from all cities, top 20 markets, small, large, medium markets, all over the US, right? They go, I'm making less money. I'm making less money. By the way, let's Chris remind them that we're running a poll. Please go vote for the poll. It's going to be open for about 15 minutes. And then we're going to have another poll coming up after that, and we'll announce the results at the end of the show. So let's get right into it, Len. The article is out for the second time, and we read it again, obviously. And then, by the way, how does it feel to go viral? This is you want.
I gotta interrupt. I'm sure there's no academics watching this program. It's not their thing, but
There are a few.
in academia, people write these kind of very arcane. I can't understand what the heck they're talking about, and they post them in academic journals that no one but academics read. So they might get 300 hits on a something they've worked for in a year, and I hope your audience is going to find as we go through. I don't talk that way, so we're just going to sort of lay out. This is the way you guys understand the business. This is what I've learned from you, and hopefully we can all agree. But we'll see.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's start with a simple question. Okay.
Yeah.
What is your definition of a take rate?
It's not my definition. I didn't define, hey, based on some new theory, here's what take rate is. Whenever I approach looking at an industry, I try to understand, how the industry players are thinking about and managing their business, whatever side of the business you're on, whether you're a driver, whether you're Uber or something in between. And so I define take rates by the industry norm. And I'll sort of qualify that. If you sort of think about how the different constituents in this industry think about take rates, you take the driver. It's very simple. You guys have taught me over the years that you define take rate as the spread between the price that the passenger pays without tips and your pay as a driver from all forms of pay from Uber. That could be the base rates and the bonuses and the surges and the boosts and the multi-trip incentives. You take all, and again, hold the tips on the side. And it's the spread between those two. Passenger, what percent of the passenger fare is retained by Uber, and what's left is what goes to the driver. It's just that simple. So that's at the individual driver level. That's how I would suggest any driver on this call probably thinks about it. Makes perfect sense. If you roll that up, every single trip, all the trips a given driver takes in a month, the millions of trips I had access to look at, the billions of trips that Uber, roll up all of the fares, tips on the side, discounts from the fare on excluded. That becomes something called gross bookings. It's the gross bookings. They say just roll up all the fares. That's what it is. And then you take out from that all of the pay that Uber pays to its drivers. What's left is revenue. And it's just that simple. So from a corporate perspective, the take rate is just the ratio between the company's revenue to its total bookings. The rest goes to the driver. And then two last points. And I want to really reinforce this because there's nothing mysterious about this. Everyone that I'm aware of, except Uber, has used this definition. So if you take Lyft in their most recent earnings report, they came out for the first time in a long time and gave, in essence, their take rate. And they defined their bookings as follows, and I quote, Lyft defines gross bookings as the total dollar value of transactions invoiced to rideshare riders, including all applicable taxes, all tolls, all fees, and excluding tips to drivers. And none of these carve-outs about all the things that Uber has been recently talking about. It's all the money that rolled in, holding tips on the side. Revenue is then the gross bookings minus driver pay. And then the final word I'll say in this is the way Uber has defined it for years. You go back for years and look at quarterly earnings reports, and it's very simple. Quote from Uber's latest earnings report and the ones before that. Quote, "We define take rate as a revenue as a percentage of gross bookings." Full stop.
Yep. Pretty simple, right?
So I didn't invent anything. I just said
No,
that's
you know what? I've been in quarrels with our community quite a while about this take rate issue, and I think this will settle it. And everybody's entitled to think what they do, obviously, what they think of take rates. To me, as a rideshare driver, what Uber makes is really not that much of my concern because I'm trying to be profitable for my own business to start with. However, there are a lot of people who are ticked off because their costs are going up as well. Like over the last 3, 4, or 5 years, maintenance costs, car costs, everything has gone up. So they go like, well, I'm providing all the service. I'm providing the tools for the service. How come Uber is taking so much of the fare? So going forward, I think this will clarify for me as much as the community is this. We have 3 points of contact here. What the passenger paid, what the driver received out of that pay directly, and what Uber kept. That's what it is. Simple as that. ABC. And I think Lyft may have opened the door for both companies now to do the same thing, as opposed to Uber saying, well, our commercial rates have gone up so much that we have to back that out, and we have to pass through this, pass through that. I think, look, this is simple math. We as drivers, we're simple people, mostly. We think of math as simple. 1 + 1 is 2. That's it. So if a passenger paid $50 and I made 25, Uber kept 25, that's 50%. That's the take rate. Do you agree? Should we do this? That's the way to do it?
Yes. I mean, that's and I believe that it's not just you and me. It's just generally everyone that I'm aware of except Uber. Now, in Uber's defense, they are a very global company, and there are different types of costs and fees and issues that they have to deal with, and different revenue recognition. And I think in their blog, which I only skimmed, I didn't have time to read it carefully today, they point out that, well, different markets are different, but let's be very clear on this conversation we're having today. And in the article I wrote last week, I'm only talking about the United States. What happens in the UK or in 73 other countries, I'll get to that maybe. Never.
Yeah, we don't know. I mean, look, we
We're
don't know what happens.
about the US and its situation. Uber is free you can define take rates any way you want, but please, when one of your important constituencies like drivers say, this is the way we think about take rates, don't say, you're wrong and the right way is our way and our way is we have a much lower take rate. Try to communicate in the same terms that your audience has thought about this business from the beginning. And I think everyone would be better off for it.
I agree. So Chris, let's go to the, you had some wonderful graphs in your article, and then there were I always say, hey, pictures are worth 1,000 words. And to me, they're pretty self-explanatory to me. I mean, I'm like,
right.
I don't think it takes a genius to figure it out. So let's put the first one up and then let's see. No, not that one.
Not that one.
Not that one. Yeah, that one right there.
That would work.
So, these are pretty self-explanatory, but let's spend a couple of minutes on each and
sure.
Explain us what the graph on the left is and what the graph on the right is.
Well, just a little backstory. It's kind of interesting. I teach, as often as the case in business schools, with a case study method, and every week there's a different company profile: Domino's Pizza, Uber, whatever. And I can tell you, over the years, and I've been doing an Uber case since 2016, without even a close second, Uber is by far the most popular case study because it's just a fascinating company. I mean, any way you look, and I'll get to this chart in 1 second, but just the key background is, any way you look at Uber, it's been, probably the most fascinating company in certainly the lifetime of my students, and if not my lifetime as well. Why? Okay, so they are, to my knowledge, the fastest growing startup in history. They went $0 to $10 billion in revenue faster than anyone, faster than Amazon. Just extraordinary. They have arguably the best consumer value proposition of any startup that's ever, hit the market. They have raised and lost more money than any startup in history. And recently, under the leadership of Dara Khosrowshahi, engineered an amazing turnaround. I mean, going from a period where most folks, myself included, had doubts whether they could ever be profitable. And here we are. They're throwing off billions of dollars of free cash flow. So, it raises two questions. Why has it been so hard to make money? And what the heck happened? How did Dara pull the rabbit out of the hat? So those are the two questions that I think these charts are going to answer, and why my students have found it so fascinating. I also have guest speakers in my class. My guest speaker this year was Emil Michael.
Oh, ex-Uber.
You old timers, you may remember Emil was the number 2 guy under Travis. He was the head of business development. Yeah. He launched and ran the China operations as long as that lasted and the like. And what he shared with me, so looking at the left-hand side of this chart, is this is showing the average Uber US price per trip, the price that the passenger pays per trip. And it's indexed. We started with the average price in 2015 and then kind of took it down to the time Dara came in the late summer of 2017. And as you can see, Uber had a concerted policy to continue to lower prices. They were already losing a ton of money, and they kept lowering their price. Why? Because they wanted to achieve that explosive growth that I referred to. And what Emil shared with the class was we felt the most effective marketing expense we could have is to essentially subsidize trips. And it would pour in, way more customers than anything else we could do. And, in fact, that was the case. So the problem with that is at the time, over those years, both the drivers and the passengers were keyed to a kind of rate card. And so when you drop the rate card on what passengers pay, you're also dropping what the dealers were paid. And that led to that big argument that Travis had and got him in trouble. The video went viral. And, the problem is consumers loved it, but drivers hated it. Okay. Enter Dara, comes in 2017, and his marching orders are right off the top. Get this company public as soon as possible, lock in some big returns for the early investors, go for it. And to do so, he had to overcome 3 huge problems. One, a toxic, demoralized culture he inherited. 2, just tremendous burn rate at the time, in part because of these dropping fares. And 3, growing driver unrest as they were now getting concerned about the concerns in their pay. So when he came in, probably the first thing he did is really set a great tone to fix and repair the culture. And he came in with a signature promise: I will do the right thing, period. Boom. And I give the man tremendous credit for what he did, then and right until now to really improve the way the company felt about itself. And he's a very popular CEO and should be. So great credit there. He also made some great progress on reducing their burn rate. But I would argue that he's actually made a kind of some level of driver unrest a lot worse over time. And that's what's going to be the essence of this conversation. So one thing he did right off the bat is he began for the first time in Uber's history raising prices. And you can see the arrow from where he came in on the left-hand chart. The average price zoomed up at a much faster rate than the overall CPI in the US. And that was to make up for the price cuts that were so ruinous to the economics of the company earlier. And then if you kind of fast forward to what happened, a year after they IPO'd, or less than a year after they IPO'd, the company's hit by a pandemic, their rideshare demand craters. And I kind of looked at the price movement since then, sort of rebasing it to April of 2020 and going forward. And you can see it gave the company cover to continue to raise prices very, very rapidly, way outstripping the CPI. And it's pretty much all of that increase peaked in about 2021, and it's kind of stayed at that level. So
Right.
number one repair item is get the prices, back to what the market would bear, and it made a lot of sense, and it helped the company immensely.
Right. So that's half the equation, right? So,
Yep.
I mean, as a driver, I know this for a fact that I was making great money until the company went IPO. And because during the growth phase of the company, they were just showing the money to everybody because they needed drivers, they needed growth, they needed passengers. They had the VC money to burn, like, drunken sailors. And everybody was happy, right? And drivers were happy, passengers were happy. The only people that were not happy probably were the VCs. But then the company goes public. My earnings obviously immediately took a dip as a driver because of now there was no more free money. This is a public company with, VCs are taking their money out, and now they have to make money, actual money, profits. The mother's milk of every corporation is actual profits. And sure enough, the only way you can do that in a two-sided marketplace, as we all know, okay, this is not complicated. This is not rocket science, Uber. In a two-sided marketplace, you have to charge as much as you can and pay as little as you can, and the spread between keeps growing. And at their scale of 2.5 billion trips now per quarter, they turned profit last 2 quarters in a row, and all power to them. They did it. So
Yeah.
the fares, these first 2 charts say how much the fares have gone up, and you use YipIt data for this source, correct? What was the percentage?
I'm sorry, what was the what?
What was the percentage increase in fares since 2018?
The one I remember is since 2020, when I rebased it,
Right.
was about 40%, and
40%.
it's probably from the low base of when Dara came in through 2020, probably another 20%.
Yeah, so call it maybe 50, 55. I subscribe to YipIt, and it's about 53,
Yeah.
55%.
I mean, just so you know, there was a kind of a minor change in that before the pandemic, there actually was a kind of viable Uber pool business in operation. And if you
Yeah.
take what I've done in all of this analysis of their average price level, is the prices you're seeing shown here represent an overall average of all of the different services: Uber Comfort, Uber X, Uber Pool, Uber whatever.
Yeah.
And so in the early years before the pandemic, a noticeable chunk of that was Uber Pool, which tends to lower the average because pool prices were lower.
Yeah.
Pool's over. The pandemic killed it, never
Yeah.
came back. So I rebased it afterward, starting with the pandemic, to say, well, now that's out, and we'll just watch what everything else does from there. So that's what we're.
So let's go to, now let's go to the other side of the coin. I mean, this is the passenger side. Passenger side, the fares went up for 50, 55% on average.
Yeah.
Which they had to do, which is fine. Now let's go to the driver's side.
Okay. You're going to flip that? Yeah. I mean, so just to remind you, there was a kind of a little change. It was a big change, but it didn't initially get as much attention as it should. In 2016, Uber introduced upfront pricing for passenger fares.
Yes.
And this kind of decoupled what had been this complete locked-in relationship that both passengers and drivers used to get their prices and fares set by a rate card per mile per minute.
Yes.
And starting in 2016, Uber changed its policy so that it just charged passengers a fare. It wasn't pegged to a specific rate card.
Yep.
At the same time, they kept the drivers on a rate card per mile per minute. Now, there are other forms of compensation, as everyone on this call knows. There is, surges and boosts and quests and all kinds of stuff. But the key here is that the one thing Dara did is he continued the prior policy of dropping the rate card rates pretty precipitously.
Yep.
And this is important because even at the kind of lower levels of per mile and per minute rates, at least a rate card gave you the comfort or assurance that you will never get paid less than X. If the trip was 25 minutes and 17 miles, you're not going to get paid less than what's implied by this. And hopefully, if you're smart enough, we'll figure out which trips offer the best boosts and surges and all that stuff, and you can supplement your income. And I would assume drivers on this call can well remember the good old days when 30% or more of their total pay came from bonuses over and above the base rate. But in any event, through it all, the base rate kept going down under both CEOs all the way through most of 2022 as shown here. And at the same time, what you see on the right-hand side for a whole variety of cost elements that represent the cost of ownership and operation that the drivers have to absorb and pay for, maintenance and fuel and the cost of buying a newer used car, and insurance rates were climbing, particularly in the later years, by an enormous amount. So that's a bad combination when your base rates are going down, the guaranteed amounts are going down, and your costs are going up. Led to a lot of driver unrest, as you all well know.
Yeah, I mean, I listen to every one of their conference calls, obviously, and we know as drivers what's happening to our costs, right? From maintenance costs, used car parts. Obviously, a full-time driver drives 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 miles a month. Frequent oil changes. We know, plus gas prices, obviously, specifically in the West Coast, right? We know what's going on there. The costs are not stable on the driver's side. Obviously, we endure inflation as anybody else does in this country, and our rents have gone up. Everything else commensurate, obviously, except our pay. To me, it seems like, because if you look at the chart on the left, people, that's a rate card. Where is it from? From LA, right? Okay. And if you guys been around
cities,
for a while,
I just chose LA. I had lots of other cities, and they all look pretty similar, so I just picked one.
Yeah, I mean, California is the largest Uber market, so he picked LA, and those are the rates, right? Before upfront fares, towards the middle or third quarter of 2023, the rate card that I know of for my rate card was 60 cents a mile, 21 cents a minute. Now, had to be profitable at that level. Obviously, have incentives and as such, but I listened to every one of the Uber conference calls, and one other thing that caught my eye, Len, on the last one was that Dara was talking quite happily about that. A lot more people are driving, which is true. They went from 5 million to 6.5 million drivers globally year over year, and that they're staying on the platform longer and driving longer because everything is so great. I disagree. So the reason we're driving so much more is because of the rate card right here, because math does not lie. If I was getting $1.20 a mile and 35 cents a minute and my rates get cut in half, I have to drive twice as much to make the same amount of money because the incentive disappeared anyway.
All right, thanks for watching. That short little clip was from our live stream, Show Me the Money Club with Sergio and myself, Tuesdays, 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific. Make sure you subscribe, turn on all notifications so you get notified when we go live, as well as all of our awesome content. Make sure to check out this video right here, which will take you to the entire live stream, or check out this video right there. All right, drive smart, everyone.